introduced before, my name is Siva and I'm a remote work advocate and a CEO at Remote How. At Remote How, we are teaching the world how to work remotely with the main focus on managers of distributed teams or wannabe managers of distributed teams. We work with various clients and partners all across the globe. And what you will hear today won't be Ivo talking, like Ivo inventing how the remote work should be done, but those are our partners, experts from companies like Envision, GitLab, Buffer, Doist. So companies that are operating this way since years, and they really learned how it should be done. So it will be short and sweet, hopefully, and you will learn a lot. And if you'll have any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. We'll probably have some short Q&A session here. I will do my best to meet your expectations. So a short agenda for this call. I will briefly walk you through the types of distributed teams because remote is not always the same. Then we'll chat about implementing the remote first mindset in management because it all starts with mindset. When we also started Remote How, the first challenge that we came across even before we actually started to do this, but the market research was the challenge with the mindset. The fact that you don't see someone working next to you is scary for most of the managers still. So it's so important to put an emphasis on the remote first mindset. Then we will switch to building the team across different locations, topic on the communication and engagement despite the distance that we briefly touched on in the beginning, the asynchronous and synchronous communication. And then we'll move to the last part, so understanding the distributed team's motivation, fears, and hopes. Because although remote work is awesome, it also has its challenges, and we need to be aware of them. Before I start, alert that this is a crash course. So we can talk on these topics for hours, for days, weeks, write books, go through certain programs, courses. So it will touch on these 5 important aspects. But of course, if you want to get a better and deeper understanding, there is an unlimited number of resources that you can dive into and study this a bit farther. So starting with the first one, types of distributed teams. So as I mentioned, we need to understand that remote is not the same. There are different types of teams that are working on a distance, and that's why this is the beginning of the proper understanding how to make remote work. So there are couple of different differentiators here. The first one is location. So the first one on the location is a split team. So a team that is working in 2 or more different locations and they're interacting with each other. In most cases, most companies that are operating even non-remote right now, when they have projects with different offices, with different teams that are not in one location, they're already split teams. They already remote to each other. So this is the first type. The second type is a hybrid team. So a team that has a location, but it's remote around this location. And people are working within the office, but people are also working outside the office. The third aspect, considering the location, is a full remote team. There is no headquarters and everyone is remote. If you already think what is the case for you and how it will differentiate further, stay tuned with us. We'll also chat a bit more on that. So that was location. Then when we are moving to the second type of teams, it's a frequency. It's either office first, so majority of people are still coming to the office. It's remote first, so we encourage our people to work outside the office, but they also have an option to come and work from our office. Oh, it's remote only. That also impacts the way how we plan projects, execute them, communicate, etc. So there are different reasons why we are going distributed, and sometimes even don't think about it. We just say like, oh yes, we want to go remote, we want to go distributed. But it's really important to answer, to get an answer why we are actually doing this. So we distinguish 4 different aspects. The first is ideological, right? So it's driven by either the founder or the CEO that believes that future is remote, and that gives us a lot of benefits that probably a lot of speakers today will chat about. Just to name one of them, the access to the global talent pool, and this is why we're doing this, right? The other aspect that we've noticed on the market is there's a star anchor. So we are building the team around a skilled employee or skilled employees that if we are not remote, we cannot attract, we cannot get on board. And this is our reason why we are going remote. The third aspect is a trusted network. So we are building the team where we already have people that we trust, we know. Maybe we run several workshops, we've been to conferences, we met some folks, and this is why we are setting the hub or we are hiring remote people from there. Last one is improve the cooperation between departments in countries. So as we introduce a more distributed model, we encourage everyone to better collaborate with each other, even if everyone is still working from the office, but we are already implementing this remote way of collaborating. So that was the first one, to really understand what type of remote you're doing, you want to do, and what are the reasons why you're actually into this. The second essential is remote first mindset in management. In my opinion, this is actually the most important one. If we are not convinced as managers, as decision makers, that this is the way to go and we'll build everything around it, then we are setting ourselves for failure. Unfortunately, this is what we noticed among many of our clients, people that also have challenges with remote. It all starts with mindset. So it's not just that you're letting your employees to work from anywhere. You're actually building the success around the proper mindset. So diving into this, it doesn't mean that you're putting your remote employees above the on-site ones. No, remote is about creating equality. And unfortunately, in most cases, people that are right now on-site in the office are above. Maybe not specifically above that they are better, but the work setup is around them. So when you're going distributed, it's important to have a single source of truth and single way of doing things that are equal to everyone. That's extremely important, because otherwise people that are in the office, then compared to people that are remote, they think that some stuff is different, some things should be done differently, and then it creates a mess. So just strongly encourage you to treat everyone equal. And then, of course, when you're considering remote employees, everything needs to be inclusive to all work styles. So there is no one size fit all, right? But there is a general way of doing things that is precisely defined, and everyone has the same mindset. Hey, we are equal. This is how we are communicating. This is how we are proceeding with these projects, with deadline, etc., right? That's extremely important to keep in mind. It's a pure change management. I'm fully aware of that. We're doing this since over 2 years, so it takes time, right? So there are a couple of things that you should consider when going more and more distributed. So first of all meetings should be accessible and engaging for remote workers, right? The case that we often hear is that there are some remote people, the meeting is taking place in the office, there's just one webcam, people are on the screen, but actually everyone is doing something on their laptop in the conference room, not paying attention to what's happening. Make sure it's equal. Everyone is dialing separately. Everyone is dialing as if they are remote, and we are engaging everyone as they are actually, the location doesn't matter. Like, the meeting should be location agnostic. That's number one aspect to consider. Then when it comes to communication, I previously mentioned that processes in communication are key. So making sure that everyone knows where and how to communicate. And the most important thing about communication is to really encourage people to write stuff down. Taking small steps, right? You won't change the world from the day one. You need to be persistent, and be persistent about the change that you're implementing. It will be for the greater good, for the future. In the beginning, it will be a bit fuzzy, but as you go along, it will be improved, and also people will see that if it gives them benefits, because someone took notes from this meeting that took place like 4 months ago on the product roadmap, and now we can we have this single source of truth that I mentioned that we can get back to. Moving forward, making time for socialization, really mixing the online and offline world. There are multiple ways what you can do. One of them is to build a water cooler, the remote water cooler. Either it's a chat on your communicator, Twist or Slack, or there are weekly, bi-weekly calls, or you're organizing retreats, but you're making sure that remote is not only about work. So remote work is also about building the connections, building their relationships. So then it gives a positive impact when people are working together, because they know each other more than just, oh, someone assigned me a task in Asana, but actually I have no clue who is this person. Last but not least, not to micromanage and trust people. This is something that a lot of companies, doesn't matter remote or non-remote, claim to do, right? We are not micromanaging, and we are trusting you. We are setting you up for success, and then you're sailing on your own, and we are looking at the outcome of your work. But in practice, still coming back to the mindset aspect, that's not always the reality. So remember to trust your employees. Actually, ask yourself if you really trust your employees, if you're remote or non-remote. Awesome. So we are moving to essential number 3.
Ivo, sorry for interrupting. Can I ask you a question? Because people at YouTube asking, is it pre-recorded or live? So I will interrupt you sometimes to say that it's live, it's actually live, and it's not pre-recorded. And when you say trust your employees, what do you mean? How to do that? Because there is the belief that in the office you can see the employees like every day, but if you are doing the remote work, the person can work on the same time for different companies. How to check that? Do you have the solution here?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of aspects here. First of all, it really starts with the proper planning and executing what has been planned, right? Because if we have Monday and we have a meeting and we are saying, okay, Ivo, for this week we wanted to do this and that. Those are the KPIs that we wanted to achieve. Like, depending what is the type of the role, if it's sales or if you are a software engineer and you have like 10 stories to develop or like 10 tickets to close, but there is an outcome that you need to deliver, right? If you focus how you manage your team or your company on the outcome, then actually you don't care what's happening between 9 to 5, 8 to 12, whatever, right? You're focusing on what has been delivered, or if someone was doing what was agreed on, right? That's probably one of the most important shifts, that we are not looking if someone is working because they are in the location, but we are looking on the deliverables, what they've done. Because we can be in the same room in the office, right? And I can still be watching Netflix if you just cannot see me, or I can play Call of Duty or whatever, the game, right? And then it's 5 p.m. I'm saying, oh, thanks, it was a great day, but actually you haven't accomplished much, right? So one of the angles, and we can go on this like for hours, but probably one of the most actionable items is to focus on good planning and focus on outcomes when you're assigning work to your team, because then you can measure what has been done. And if you know that some task was supposed to take 2 hours, but someone was working on it 2 days, then you might start to dig deeper if actually there was a challenge and unforeseen issue, or if someone was just not working.
Do you hire like what is the average age in your team? So how old is like people in your team? So there is actually my own experience. When you try to hire someone who is, I'm not ageist, but when you try to hire someone who is like from 20 to 25, it's quite difficult for at the start of the career to work remotely. So it's difficult to manage the work by yourself without the boss. The boss is you, for sure you have the boss, but the boss is the remote boss. And I see a huge correlation. We even analyze the established remote companies, and I see the correlation between the remote employees' age and just startups, for example. If we analyze the remote companies, you can see that in the remote companies, people are older than in the just a regular startups, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I don't have the precise number on top of my head, but I would say it's around 27. That would be probably accurate if we take the average. I would say that age has something to do with that and not. It's less about age per se, but rather experience in working in general, right? Although we had a bunch of young people that joined us for internships, and those were their first or second jobs, and they were with us for pole internship, and there were also some of them we were hiring for full-time positions. It really comes down to the manager. So of course, it's easier to manage someone that already knows how to structure their day, make sure that they are efficient, they know how to manage their time, communicate, etc. But I'm not saying it's not doable when you're hiring the first timer remotely. You need to make sure that during the hiring process you can vet these people for certain skills, right? So you can look up if they're self-driven, if they're passionate about your company, your product, your mission, or if it's just job or if it's just an internship, because then it will impact, even though they might not know something, but if they're passionate and if they really want to push this mission forward, then they will reach out to you and like, hey Ivo, I'm stuck here, can you help me? Or like, hey Ivo, I'm really distracted today, maybe you can help me somehow, or maybe I can take 1 or 2 hours off. Then you will not look at the age, but you will look at how you work with this person, right? So yes, it's easier to hire people that are already experienced, but I wouldn't say there is a no-go for younger people to go remote.
Thanks.
Awesome. Cool. So we are moving forward with the presentation to the essential number 3. So building the team across different location. So we were speaking about the fact that even if you have 2 locations and you work with each other, you're already remote when you're working on certain projects, when you're conducting meetings. So there is a process that we defined when you're building this team, let's say for the first time, and what are the aspects that you need to look at if you want to succeed when building a team that is not in the same place, right? It all starts with hiring the right talent. And this is what actually I've just said, that there are certain aspects, right? Certain traits that you should be looking for when you're hiring for a remote position. I mentioned the self-driven aspect, and I think this is one of the most important ones. To me personally, the most important one, because you might lack experience, you might lack knowing how to do stuff, but if you're self-driven, you're look it up yourself, you will coach yourself, you will reach out to your manager with questions, because the goal is to get it done, and you're driven to make it happen. Even if even if it's your first time, or if you're coming across certain challenges. The second aspect is people that are remote, or people that are working in the distributed fashion, need to be skilled communicators. We chatted about before on the written aspect of the communication. So the more you write down, the better. And oftentimes when we're just writing with each other, there is no body language. We need to know how to express ourselves. This is on the writing side, but also on the call, on the video call like this, it's important to have the message and know how to put the message across. Last but not least, people should be disciplined. We're working remotely, right? Some of them work from places where there are some things that might be distracting you. So you need to make sure that you're disciplined. This is work, this is not fun, and I'm delivering to what I promised. Just a sip of water. Okay, so assuming that we have the right talent, we have driven people, perfect communicators, disciplined, experienced. Now we need to make sure that we know what kind of culture we want to build, or if it's a company that already exists, what kind of culture we should cultivate. Culture is one of the things that companies say that they have certain culture, but then in reality, either the culture doesn't exist or the culture is completely different to what you're preaching on your career page. So make sure, those are just like two very simple, actionable aspects. Make sure that you communicate your company's vision and goals, fully transparent, right? There are, of course, edge case scenarios like buffer, when this transparency is really tied to companies' core values. And for example, they are publishing their P&L and all the revenue numbers 100% public, not even just internet, right? But the more transparent you are, the better. Then cultivate the rituals. And both the rituals that are related to work, right? Okay, we have a ritual that we are taking notes during each meeting, but they're also cultivate rituals that are bonding team with each other, right? The previously mentioned water cooler, the retreats, yearly retreats, quarterly retreats, and make sure that you follow on them, right? Not that just it happened once. Make sure that people know that this is the process, and this is how it will be developed further in future. Last but not least, be aware that there are development stages. You cannot change the world just like that, right? So there is a forming, storming, norming, and performing model when you're doing a group development, right? So be prepared that when you're changing stuff, then it will get a bit challenging, then it will normalize, and then you will optimize the performance, right? So this is a very simple process. I've mentioned that this is a crash course, so feel free to dive deeper into that. The good practices, right? So we have this process, but the good practices of a team building needs to happen every single day. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of them that hopefully you can take back to your teams and start implementing from today. So first of all, make sure you have time to connect with everyone outside work. That's extremely important to bond, to really get into another level than just work with people that you're working with. You don't have the offline water cooler. You don't have a kitchen when you're going and doing a coffee and having a chit chat about the game yesterday. So really make sure to put emphasis on that. Another aspect, conduct shared learning experience, right? Embed this to your quarter review, your onboarding, but make sure that you're learning from each other. You understand who you are, so then you can better adjust your communication, your in general work with people. People are different, and the beauty of remote is that it attracts different types of talents, also talent from all over the world, the people that learned a lot of stuff that you don't know. So be open to have a process in place when you can share these experiences. Having team time on regular calls, right? So chat what's working, what's not working within your team, not just talk about, hey, I delivered this and you haven't accomplished this task. I touched upon that. Virtual or on-site team retreats, extremely important to bond. Yeah, I've been chatting about the culture and bonding already. So just make sure that when you're planning your budget, when you're planning your touch points with teams, that's in place. Essential number 4, so we are getting closer to the end, communication and engagement despite the distance. Been asked about synchronous and asynchronous communication. Here it goes. This is the Bible of the communication for remote teams. So for those of you that haven't heard that, we have asynchronous communication, where it's mainly around reading and writing. And we also have synchronous communication when it's about talking and listening. And now we will dive into what are our advices for asynchronous communication, how you can use it, and the synchronous communication. So I strongly encourage you to make sure that you do more and more asynchronous communication. So whenever possible, do it. If it's check-in updates, if it's check-in checkouts, if it's updates, group feedback, praising, kudos, these stuff should be done in an asynchronous way. That will also encourage people to write it down, and then you can come back to this, right? So think how you communicate within your company and what can be translated to be asynchronous, so it's more efficient. And if you're working within different time zones, for example, you don't need to have someone waking up at 4 a.m. in San Francisco because there is a stand-up going on in Europe around noon, right? That would be quite insane. Then there is a synchronous aspect, and I'm absolutely not saying that everything should be asynchronous, because there are things that we cannot replace with writing, like for example body language. So we strongly recommend to conduct one-on-one meetings, meetings that has critical and direct feedback, to be synchronous, to be live, also negotiation, tough news like layoffs, and whenever the ego is involved, or it can be hard to read between lines, this is a moment when you should have synchronous way of communicating within your team. Last essential, number 5. So there are motivations, fear and hopes around distributed teams that we need to be all aware of, and address them. When it comes to motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, there are 2 different ways how people are motivating themselves, right? One is on behaviors driven by internal rewards. So for example, being a part of the team, solving problems, making an impact on what's happening around me. This is what drives people internally. But there are also people driven by external rewards, like promotion, praise, salary raise, extra benefits. If you know what is someone motivation, right? Which bucket it falls into, it's easier for you to work with this person, to either work as a coworker or work as a manager, because you will adjust the messaging and also adjust the way how you motivate in the long run someone, right? We have people on our team, and it's also, you can see it in different surveys, like there was one big report by Glassdoor, that people are not motivated anymore that much as in the past by salary, right? If once they reach a certain threshold of salary that they can afford what they want, more doesn't mean better. They are looking for different ways to be motivated. So answer this question for all people on your team, and it will really help you. Doesn't matter if it will be remote or non-remote. As a manager, as a CEO that is thinking about remote or already doing remote work, have a distributed team, you need to be aware of the fears. It's not only pinky and shiny, there are challenges. One of the most important ones, it's around loneliness, being isolated and not heard, right? On the isolation and being not heard, it oftentimes happens because you don't have a process where people can raise a hand and say, hey, I wanted to chat about this. This doesn't work. What do you think about this idea? If they're working, for example, from home and they don't have someone to just walk 5 meters and just poke them and say, hey, what do you think about that? Then it might be a challenge, right? Then no career advancement. This is something that again falls into this processes aspect, that doesn't matter if you're remote or non-remote, if you can go to your manager that is sitting across the hall and have a chit chat, it needs to be clear that you will get a promotion after certain period of time, after delivering certain number of projects, after reaching your KPIs. Doesn't matter if you had this chit chat and if you build this relationship, it needs to be as objective as possible. Loneliness is very challenging still. That's why make sure that you have ways to help people challenge this. Offer them a card to pay for their co-working space, offer them a reimbursement to go to the coffee shop to work if they prefer this way. Then coming back to the to retreats, right? This is also a way how you can make, hey, we see each other in a couple of weeks, awesome, we'll go on rafting, surfing, whatever it would be. It won't be connected that much to work. Working long hours, right? To prove that you're worth, right? To prove that you're actually working. So you can summarize it as a burnout. That happens especially if you have a manager that doesn't trust you, right? So that's the last one, and that's what we discussed in the beginning. So you want to like, oh, it's 10 p.m. doesn't matter, but I need to work on this stuff, right? No, it's not how it should be done. Your manager should trust you, and you should trust your manager. And if your contract is for 8 hours, you should be working 8 hours. We strongly and not encourage people to work more. We really need to prevent the burnout in general in today's startup world. And that really boils down to trust, right? And trust is connected to outcome. So we are coming back to our initial discussion. So quick recap from all of our 5 essentials. First, there are different types of distributed teams, and there's no universal management model, right? You need to adjust accordingly to your scenario. Second, build policies considering all working styles and make sure that meetings are inclusive, that the way how you work is inclusive. Third aspect, team building starts with being intentional about knowing your employees, right? This is where we were chatting on the motivation aspect. Make sure that you invest time in better knowing your employees. It will really pay off. It will really pay off if you aside some time aside that is not connected to this specific task, but having a casual conversation with your coworker. Fourth aspect, prioritize asynchronous communication over synchronous communication. This is the key for remote teams. Last but not least, spot your team's motivation and be aware of their fears. Be aware that remote is not only amazing if you're not doing this right, make sure that there are pitfalls that you won't fall into. So that's all from my side. If you're hungry for more, if you're a manager of a distributed team, or if you're thinking about going distributed, I'm more than happy to chat with you. This is my email. I'm also available on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out. I will be more than happy to have a conversation. Thank you so much, everyone.